Good morning. It's my first podcast or video cast or whatever you want to call it. My name is Erica. I'm 54 and I've been meaning to do this for a really, really long time. It's time now. Welcome to Pangaea. This is our sailboat. Pangaea is a aluminum sloop. She's 47 feet long on paper, but in reality she's a bit longer than that. You might end up hearing some sounds from outside because we are on the water in a marina, and whenever a boat goes by, the boat rocks and rolls. You can hear stuff, so you can kind of hear cracking here and there, but at least the wind died down, so it won't be the banging of sheets on the mast and stuff like that. This is a cup that a friend gave me. She spelled my name wrong, and I really prefer it with a K, but she's a dear friend, and I've grown fond of the cup. And I was thinking yesterday how if somebody said, Erica, we could trade that cup in for one with a K, I would say no, because I've had it for so long, and it's funny to have it say Erica with a C. So I thought I would start out by pointing out some of my faults so that we can get down to business. I have puffy eyes right now. I'm a little bit wrinkly. I didn't tweeze, so you might see a couple of stray hairs on my chin here. I also haven't bleached my mustache. I refuse to take care of all those little hairs. I just kind of live with them. Living with my crow's feet. Living with my homemade hair, which is teal right now. I go between teal and green and turquoise, but always in that realm of the rainbow. I've been bluish since over 5 years now, and every day I still get comments out there about how it's something people seem to enjoy. I call it a little bit also my asshole barometer, because anybody who doesn't enjoy it, it usually is able to tell me exactly to what extent that person is probably not somebody that I want to spend time with. I'm wearing one of my monoboo bras today. I don't usually get dressed up for coming onto the boat. I can give you a little bit of a tour to see what things look like. So I will likely be learning as I go along here. Some people say I have an interesting life, and I've always enjoyed sharing it since the pandemic started, and actually for the last 20 years tapering off. I just seem to be writing less and less. But I write in my head a lot, and I also enjoy my ASMR videos that I listen to. I don't really enjoy whispering, and I don't really think makeup and doctor's visits and massage visits are so interesting or exciting, or they don't really put me to sleep either. So I thought I would combine a kind of an ASMR feeling with my diary and see how that goes. There are a couple of artists out there that seem to be doing that, so I'm just being a sheeple doing it too. I live in Sarasota, Florida. The boat is presently in Port Charlotte, Florida. It's about an hour south of Sarasota. And I'm married almost 29 years to a man from Hamburg, Germany, whose name is Achim. It means brothers in Hebrew, which had thrown me for a loop because when I met him I had never been to Germany, and I had heard that name Achim from the song Hava Nagila Hava, which goes Yolo Achim Malasaveya Yolo Achim. Oh, doesn't that mean something in Hebrew? Yes, it means brothers. So my hubby is out getting some diesel parts, fix up the engine. You know, owning a boat means that you get to fix your boat in exotic places. That's all about cruising. I met him in 1990, and we bought our first Panjay in 91, sailed away in 92, crossed the Atlantic in the New Year's of 93, 94, and then spent 94, 95, 96, 97, 98 on the other side of the Atlantic in the United States and the Bahamas. Went down to Jamaica and Panama, went through the Panama Canal. And in 1998, I started a pretty well-known for its time wandering website, because the word blog didn't really exist yet. And people crossed the South Pacific with me into French Polynesia, where I became pregnant with my first child, my daughter Antonia. And then we sailed up to Hawaii and had her there, and that was the beginning of phase 1, motherhood. We lived in Hawaii for a number of years, and I had my second child, Ari, my son. He's leaving the nest this week. He's 19 now. And we sold that boat to a Swiss family and then bought another boat in the south of France while we were in Hawaii. My husband quit his job. We jumped aboard with 2 children from the Med, crossed the Atlantic again with them, and then I got pregnant with number 3, and it was time to stop that phase of life. So in 2005 we moved to Florida, where she was born. That's Maiva. Maiva just turned 15 and got her learner's permit. Actually, she's getting it on Monday. And with her starting to drive and her being our youngest, it kind of feels like we're now going into a new phase of our life. Something else that changed our lives starting in 2009 is we started investing in properties. We started with very little money and bought various properties in various stages of distress sale, foreclosure, tax deeds, etc. Even condominium lien foreclosures. And I learned while going on and doing. We renovated those condos and either sold them or kept them, and just kept doing that cycle over and over. And I now own a number of properties in the Sarasota Manatee area, And I have myself a troupe of lovely tenants, and they help to support my lifestyle. My hubby just stopped his day job last August, and now he makes solar installations. He's kind of a mad scientist, trying to maybe get a patent and working on the possibility of removable mobile solar installation that, for example, tenants could take from place to place rather than always having it on the roof of the house, which is usually a pretty permanent structure. There are different things I'd like to share, and I once had a writing teacher who said, "Erica, everything that you do is quite fascinating, but you keep kind of switching gears. You know, I love poetry, I love journalism, I love memoir, I love fiction." She says, "Erica, just take one vehicle and ride it to the end." Now, I tend to just jump on and off of the skateboard to the bicycle to the sailboat. That's just kind of who I am. So most likely I will be flitting from subject to subject, things that are touching me on that particular day, or explaining and illustrating and detailing some of the trials and tribulations that my husband and I have gone through over the years, and what we're going through now, and what we likely will be going on in the future. Something I also haven't mentioned is, since we purchased those properties, we have a number of lawsuits going on. Some of them we're representing ourselves. Some of them we've retained representation. All of those litigation situations I find fascinating. And the great thing about it is, if you don't find them fascinating, they'll put you right to sleep. So you kind of can't lose either way. A little bit about myself. I was born in New Jersey to two Jewish Brooklynites. My mom is from Coney. My dad was from Brownsville. They met when they were 19 and 21, respectively, got married, and had 3 daughters. I'm the youngest of 3. When I was 2 years old, they took us over to Basel, Switzerland, to live for a year. And then we came back to Jersey, and when I was 4, we moved to Southern California, namely Huntington Beach, where we lived for 1 year before we finally settled on Laguna. So I moved to Laguna when I was 5, and I stayed there from kindergarten through high school. Those were pretty magic years, as the people from Laguna seem to know. While I was at Laguna Beach High School, I was part of a program called UPHSS. It's University Program for High School Scholars, which allowed you to take courses at the university while you were still in high school. So I took some classes at UC Irvine, underwater basket weaving type classes, nothing to be too impressed about, primarily French. And when I gathered up 12 units, I just went ahead and transferred into UC Berkeley, which back in those days, you could just do that with 12 units. I didn't even have to graduate from high school. I just went straight to Berkeley. in the spring of 1994. In 95, 96, I spent my junior year in Paris and decided to get my double degree in French literature and humanities with an emphasis on writing. During that time, I dated a guy who was a musician for about 6 years, on and off. We had a kind of a open relationship based on the book of Handbook to Higher Consciousness. Pretty much of a 70s, 80s idea. There were drugs flying around in my life back then. Did some shrooming, did some ecstasy. Good memories, good times, but not always that easy. I always had a bit of a low self-confidence, which my boyfriend at the time really recognized and tried to help me in the ways that he could, but, you know, he's my boyfriend, not my therapist. And when I broke up with him, I was working at a travel agency, Council Travel. And we were opening up a new store in Berkeley for the Council Travel Services. You know, we furnished Eurail passes and international student IDs, etc. And I was at that party, and I was picking the green M&Ms out of a bowl at the opening party when I realized that this wasn't a life that I wanted. I was 23, and I just felt too young to settle into a 9-to-5 job with insurance and responsibilities and a credit card and rent. It just all felt so banal to me. And I ran upstairs to call my girlfriend Jillian, and she said, "Funny you should call me, Erica, because my cousin Sarah just called me and asked if I knew anybody who wanted to move to the south of France and help out in a chateau there." So the next day I quit, and I took a one-way ticket to the south of France. And that was in May of 1990. I lasted just a few weeks at the chateau. It was stifling to me. I was supposed to be some sort of a maid and a server and a quiet little domestic for these wealthy artist students who had come in at the chateau of Henry Cloos, the Lanapool Art Foundation. I just couldn't keep my mouth shut, you know. I was always talking to the various students that were staying there and kind of wishing I was one of them instead of serving them. So that didn't work out, and I quit that job and worked over in a camp. It was a communist camp called Le Petit Lac de Montdelieu. And I was taking care of the child of the gérant, the director of this camp. And I was to speak English to her. I was not paid for that job. He just gave me a tent and food and anything that I needed within reason. And that finally felt like freedom. I was much happier in that tent. And it might have continued on if that Sarah woman who had hired me over at the chateau, I was still friends with her at the time, and Sarah says to me, I have an issue, Erica. I'm invited to go sailing on a sailboat by this guy, Yves, like Yves Saint Laurent. And I don't really like Yves. I like this other guy named Tom. And, well, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, what time were you supposed to be there and where? And I'll just show up and let him know that you couldn't be there. So that day I was supposed to go grape picking. And instead of grape picking, I just canceled my trip to Burgundy to go sailing on a sailboat. And I showed up and instead of Sarah and said to Eve, well, she couldn't make it, but I'm here. And he felt obliged to take me home to the boat. So there was this guy. He was wearing a rope for a belt, and he had on this blue and white striped shirt, which I now know is a traditional hamburger fisherman's shirt. And he helped me aboard, and he had very bright blue eyes. And I watched him running around the boat like a Doberman, sniffing all over the place. He was everywhere, and I was impressed with his energy. And once the boat was out and we were sailing with a bunch of these students, we started talking. And I recited a poem for him. It was based on The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. It was called The Fart. Once upon a midnight nappy, as I dozed off, not so happy, for I had no shut-eye for a while. All at once I heard a putting, a soft farting, thinking it was my boyfriend Kyle. Well, it goes on something like that. And he thought it was charming, but then again, his English was pretty limited. So that's how it all started. I then, at one point, jumped into the water, and Eve was left on the boat with my then soon-to-be boyfriend Achim. And Eve said to her, "Watch out for her. Attention, celle-là, elle est dangereuse. Watch out, that one is dangerous." Which actually piqued his interest even more, and he dove in after me. And I found out that he wanted to live on a sailboat, and I always wanted to write a story about it based on the true story of my husband and I. Maybe I'll still do that, so I don't want to give away all of the details, the gory